Shalom, shalom. This video is about Parashat Mishpatim. It means judgment. It's from Exodus 21 right through to Exodus 24 verse 18. And it is a hot subtropical summer here and it's humid. So I decided not to make the video in my study, but to sit on our stoop, our veranda, and appreciate the little bit of wind, but the light is problematic, but please bear with me. The Torah portion is from Exodus 21 right through to 24:18, as I said, and it goes hand in hand with a prophet portion from the second book of Kings, chapters 11 and 12, and a gospel portion from the gospel according to Matthew. This is the 18th out of 54 Torah portions for the year. In last week's Torah portion, you'll remember we read how judges were appointed over Israel according to Jethro's advice. And this week's Torah portion gives us some of the statutes that must be enforced by them. In several cases, the crimes and the sanctions are codified, and in other cases, the sanctions were left to the presiding judge's authority. In this Torah portion, we have rules by which Adonai's people must be governed. And if I look at the Pardes reading of the text, we find the following. In a Parashat reading, the simple direct text, we have 53 laws of accountability, of which 30 are prohibitions and 23 are must-dos. In the Remes application, Adonai is the ever-loving lawgiver and the judge. He gave these rules for an ordered society. In summary, the summary of all these rules, all these commandments, is to love your neighbor as yourself. And then in the Drash extended application, right off the bat in Exodus 21 verse 2, we read that the Hebrew slave has to serve for 6 years, and in the 7th year he or she has to go free. Adonai used this law to teach us about human history. For 6,000 years we all will be slaves to our sin, but in the 7th millennium, everyone who falls under the Abrahamic covenant will be free. The 7th millennium will be the Messianic millennium, when Yeshua will reign from Jerusalem. And the same rule, of course, is applicable to letting the land rest every sabbatical year. Exodus 23 verse 10, you can read about it. In the Sod, the hidden or the secret exegesis, the gematria of Yeshua's name is 53, and the gematria of the word Torah is also 53, and the number of laws in this portion equals 53 laws. Through gematria, this portion summarized the entire Torah as your love, or a commandment to love your neighbor as yourself, and that links to Yeshua and how he expects us to live. Good day, my name is Barney de Klerk. I'm not a Bible teacher, I'm a student of God's Word. I love sharing with you what I'm learning from the weekly scripture portions. In reading this week's Torah portion, you have to remember that the purpose of the law is to provide certainty in society with constant rules that ensures fairness to all people within society. In the Torah, many transgressions are codified, i.e. the transgression is defined and the sanction is determined. Once the accused is found guilty, his punishment is set by the Torah's disciplinary codex. For a codified transgression, mitigation plays no role. To argue that you're a first-time offender or that you reacted after provocation has no effect where the sanctions are codified. Mitigation only applies where the sanction is not codified, where the judge has discretion in adjudicating the sanction or the punishment after the accused have been found guilty. This Torah portion gives us a number of ordinances regarding servants, murder, abduction, respect for our parents. Fighting and violence are dealt with famously in an expression that I'll explore a little bit more. The expression is, the rule is, a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, and a foot for a foot, a burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, and a blow for a blow. But take note, this is not a general rule for revenge as restitution, but it has a specific and narrow, limited application to fighting men who hurt a pregnant woman if the unborn baby suffers harm. I suspect that this law will find its application when abortionists are facing their judge. This Torah commandment is from Exodus 21 verse 22 to 25, and it calls for fairness and proportionality and limits the amount of punishment for a transgression. In this regard, Yeshua stated that the need for forgiveness is up to 70 times 7, and not more excessive, as we see in a worldly response. From Cain, we saw that Cain will be avenged 7 times, and from Lamech, we saw that Lamech will be avenged 77 times. This is not what Yeshua taught. This is not what the Torah teaches. Punishment must suit the crime. The fights are not limited to fights between men, but between anyone, as the Hebrew text of Exodus 21 verse 22 refers to a strife between Enoshim. That means between humans or mankind or mortals. So the fight involving women are included in this commandment. The Hebrew noun Enosh, it's Strong's word number 582 if you want to look it up. It consistently accents the frailty, the mortality, and the ethical limitation of humanity. It highlights humankind's weakness in contrast to God's power and permanence. From biblical cross-references, understanding what Enosh means, we read in Psalm 8 verse 4 that, Lord, or Adonai, what is man, what is Enosh, that you are mindful of him? And we also read in Job 15 verse 14, what is man, what is Enosh, that he should be pure? And in Psalm 56 verse 4, we read, in God I trust, I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? What can Enosh do to me? And then the last of the 4 verses I want to quote is from Numbers 23 verse 19. God is not a man, God is not Enosh, that he should lie. He is eternally true. However, it's clear that this human weakness to fight is not an excuse before the Torah. Justice must be done. Even when there are no perceivable damage to a premature baby, induced by somebody who fought with a pregnant woman's husband, he shall bear his guilt. He is guilty. And he will be brought before a judge, and the judge will have discretion, and he will decide what sanctions to apply to the fighter. However, if the newborn baby is damaged, then a like-for-like damages or tort claim will be metered out, and this is the damages that is codified in the Torah. The judge only has authority to apply the prescribed codified sanction. The moral emphasis is not to fight with a pregnant woman or not to fight with her husband when she is in proximity where she may try to intervene. In Torah law, crimes against pregnant women are so much worse than the crime committed against anyone else, because the Nasciturus fiction does not apply. Nasciturus fiction means that the unborn baby will only be considered to be a human being and have rights if he was going to be born alive, if he is born alive, will be born alive under reasonable circumstances, under common law. And this, of course, is derived from Roman law. Remember, by the Torah, unborn babies are alive and they have the same rights as any other person, and this is in stark contrast with Roman law. These rights are bestowed upon these unborn children by Adonai himself. Adonai treasures new life, and he demands that we protect and guard new life as well. crimes against pregnant women are doubled up when it affects their unborn babies, because such crimes violates the rachamim, the uteruses or the wombs, which are considered to be places of holiness and safety, of protection and of mercy. And all these aspects are desecrated when an unborn baby is hurt. Even one of God's known names reflect this. The name in Hebrew, Av Arachamim, which is normally translated as Father of Mercy. Abortionists and historic vagrants who cut open pregnant women to brutally kill their unborn babies, they desecrate this. They sin against this godly function, this name of God, and they will answer for that. The Torah's codified or prescribed sanction for hurting an unborn baby is a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, and a foot for a foot, a burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, and a blow for a blow. This sanction only applies to transgressions against unborn babies, and it does not apply to society in general. Beware that this law is often quoted out of context when people say a hand for a hand or an eye for an eye. Remember, this application is specific for unborn babies. The Torah goes on to instruct us to take responsibility of our animals as well. And theft and thieves are covered, and so are arsonists in this Torah portion. Likewise, responsibility over borrowed things cannot be avoided. You have to be the guarantor for the things you borrow. Seduction of young virgins requires a dowry payment, and subject to the girl's father's authority, maybe marriage as well. And deviant sexual practices and sacrifices to idols must be punished by death. That sanction is codified. Deviant sexual behavior or sacrifices to idolatry, and these are linked spiritually, the sanction for that is codified. The sanction is death. The treatment of foreigners, widows and orphans are covered next, followed by guidance regarding interest charges and items of pledge. Items of pledge is securities for loans, for example. To love God and to respect our leaders, also in how we disperse our crops, are an indicator of our attitudes, and that is handled next in this Torah portion. The Torah repeats again that all the firstborn humans and animals belong to Adonai. And God then reminds us to live holy unto Him, which extends to include the dietary laws. He teaches that we should not give false testimony and that we must judge fairly. Remember, judgment is a godly function. It has a higher responsibility. All of our daily walk, the Torah says, must be upright and just. We have to keep the Shabbat and the sabbatical year. This law in the Torah portion then leads the reader onto the 3 harvest festivals, which I'm not going to talk about today, but you can read it for yourself. The infamous dietary law about meat and dairy also follows then, and it's worth a separate dig-in, and I'm not going to go there today. It's rich, but there's so much to dig. It will make the video too long if I go there. Adonai told Moses that an angel will go before Israel to the place that he prepared for them, to the promised land. But this came with a stern warning as well. God promised that in response to faithfulness, He will bless Israel's food and water, and that there will be no sickness or barrenness amongst His people. And I always note and laugh that Adonai will even use hornets to drive out the placeholder nations out of the promised land. Just imagine that. If you, one of those Canaanites, and a swarm of hornets comes to drive you out to make place because you only preserved the place for the chosen people. And then At the end, Adonai renewed his covenant with Israel by dining with the 70 leaders, Moses, Aaron, Abihu, and Nadab, before he called Moses to the top of the mountains for 40 days and 40 nights. This is a very, very brief overview, but I hope that it will entice you to read the Torah portion for yourself and read it attentively. I pray that Adonai Eloheinu will bless you and keep you, that he will shine his face upon you and be gracious to you, that he will lift his countenance, his provision upon you, and that he will give you shalom. Shalom, shalom.